All right. Good morning. Say again. Blake Freeman, the first game. St. Brain through the last inning, and then game 2, Brady Backover, sophomore, and Justin Tangney through the last inning. Dang.
Is Freeman like your number 2?
Yeah. He's going to try. They said he can't do any more damage to his arm, but he's got a nerve issue in there. So he said if he can, they want him to have the surgery, but they said you can pitch if you can handle the pain, and then in August he'll have the surgery. So we'll see what happens. Well,
he better get some prescription painkillers.
We're on page 75. Okay, so listen, we're going to go over how a bill becomes a law. This will take 2 days, and there are a bunch of questions on the test over this. This is why I'm recording this for the choir and band people. Listen, so it's in your book, right? But you should probably just like make some notes in your book on next to the to the side and the margins if you want to kind of explain some of it to yourself and when you're reviewing and looking over it. Okay. So on page 75, really this starts with the person that writes the bill, that comes up with an idea for legislation and then introduces it, is called a sponsor. Now, a big misconception in our society is that the president can introduce legislation, and he can't. Okay, he has to have members of Congress do it for them. The president submits a budget to Congress every year, but they don't have to take it. They don't have to do it. Okay, but you'll hear that term, the president submitting a bill to Congress or a budget to Congress, and that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to get what he wants. Okay, so you can have co-sponsors, right? Several sponsors. You could have dozens of co-sponsors to a piece of legislation. Okay, people that really agree, help you write it, and so forth. Okay, so there are really 4 types of bills that are introduced to Congress. Okay, first is just a simple bill that, if it passes, becomes a law. Okay, these laws apply to the whole nation. Okay, most of our laws, guys, are state laws. For instance, speed limit laws. Okay, most crimes that are committed are state crimes. Okay, crimes that are committed breaking state laws. Now, there are federal crimes. We have federal drug laws. Okay, so like marijuana is a federal law. Okay, that it is illegal. All right, it's not a state law, which means Colorado and Oregon and other states that choose to ignore marijuana are violating federal law. Okay, and it's up to the executive branch of the United States of America, the Department of Justice, to enforce the law. Same thing with immigration laws. Those are federal laws. Okay, but most laws we're talking about are going to be state laws. All right, so you also have simple resolutions, concurrent resolutions, and joint resolutions that Congress can pass. Now, these are not laws, but statements. Okay, a simple resolution is an opinion or an adoption of a new procedure, say in the body of Congress. Okay, whether it be in the Senate or the House. A concurrent resolution is a simple resolutions that both halves agree on, and then a joint resolutions deal with temporary matters, amendments to a bill. Now, guys, when we start talking about legislation, it's important to remember, when we talk about amendments, we're talking about changes to the bill, not amendments to the Constitution. Big difference there. Remember we talked about earmarks? Remember in history we talked about beer and wine? Remember that part we talked about where it wasn't the 21st Amendment, but it was an amendment to the bill. Okay, so these types of joint resolutions can be passed as amendments to a bill that already exists, and then you're just going to change the bill, okay, or add on to the bill. Okay, so once a bill is introduced, it gets its first reading, and it is entered into the congressional record. Now, the fact of the matter is, most of the legislation that Congress passes costs money. And therefore, most bills start in which chamber?
The House.
Yeah, the House, okay? So what you'll see is something like House Resolution, 5150. It'll be given a number, okay? Once it's in the official congressional record, and every piece of legislation that's ever been entered, submitted into Congress, is part of the congressional record, okay? Hundreds of thousands and thousands and thousands of throughout since 1790. Okay, it's part of the congressional record. It's all there. Now, remember this part. In the House, so we'll just stay with the House. Okay, who's going to decide what committee this resolution, this bill, is sent to? The Speaker of the House. Okay. And remember the power that holds. He can send it to whatever committee he wants to. Paul Ryan. Okay? And if he doesn't like it, he'll send it to committee where it'll get what? What's the word I'm looking for? Pigeonhole. Okay? Good. So, there you go. In the Senate, it will be assigned by the majority leader. Okay? Now, once a bill is sent to the committee, let's say the committee chairman likes this bill. And we're not going to pigeonhole it, okay? It will be sent to one or more subcommittees. So it will be studied at the subcommittee level first, okay? Where it's a more detailed knowledge takes place in that subcommittee. Now, as you can see on number 3 there, it talks about the full body can force a bill out of committee after 30 days, called a discharge position. This rarely happens. Okay, but it can. Okay, so we go to subcommittee. The subcommittee will study and have public hearings. Okay, now this is a pretty interesting part of Congress.
So is the subcommittees like what you were talking about yesterday, where they like hire people in?
Yes, they have staff, congressional subcommittee and committee staff. They will also have. Amongst themselves, they'll debate this, okay? But in these subcommittees, just to clarify, Agriculture Committee. So the Agriculture Subcommittee could have the Agriculture Committee could have a subcommittee on exports and imports of agricultural goods. It could have one on pesticides and insecticides, okay? It's more specialized, all right? So what you're going to do here is hearing rooms usually look something like this. You may have seen something like this on TV before. Okay, these are desks or tables here. You have witnesses that are going to testify. These are the members of the committee. Does that make sense? Okay, and since the Republicans are in charge, here's your chair, right? Okay, and then there's going to be more Republicans than Democrats. Okay. Okay, and then you go D, 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 right? Now, who is going to come in and testify? Well, Democrats and Republicans can invite people to come talk about a bill. Okay, who's going to come testify? Experts. Experts will come in and they will ask them questions about this piece of legislation and what the impact of it will be. Okay, now, so let's take a piece of legislation on agriculture. You guys familiar with, some of you guys have been out to Colorado, the pine beetle? You guys heard of the pine beetle? Okay, in Colorado, sorry, I'm warm. In Colorado, they had a real problem with this pine beetle that was killing large swaths of the forests in Colorado. And you could see it was all brown. It was horrible, okay? So you don't want all the trees to die, right? You want the pine beetle to die. But if you use insecticides, it could have some other impacts, right, on the environment. So I think everybody agrees we want to get rid of these pine beetles, but we don't want to do more damage than good, right? Yeah. Oh, so anyhow, why don't we bring in some experts? Okay, somebody introduces a bill that says we're going to kill these pine beetles. We're going to spray. We're going to bring in big planes and helicopters, and we're going to spray the forest and try and kill these beetles. And then the Democrats, let's just say, well, wait a second. Okay, let's bring in some people to talk about this. Okay, so they bring them in, they pepper them with questions, and you'll get to have an idea of what the impact will be. Okay, so public hearings are very important. Now, they don't have to be experts; they can be celebrities. Okay, usually a hearing room generally looks like this. Members do not have to attend. Okay? So, on a boring piece of legislation, it might look like that. Just a few members there. But if you bring in a celebrity, like, I don't know, Ben Affleck, okay, who's going to show up here? What'd you say? Paparazzi. The media is going to show up. Right? And if the media shows up, guess what's going to happen? All the members are going to show up because the cameras are going to be there. Does that make sense? So a lot of times they will bring in people. I mean, people that you've heard of. Bill Gates testifies in front of Congress. You've seen Hollywood celebrities like some of these social justice warriors like, Clooney, Angelina Jolie, Brad Pitt. Those people have all testified in front of Congress. A big issue in the Catholic community is embryonic stem cell research. I don't know if you guys remember Michael J. Fox. Remember him from Back to the Future movies? And he has Parkinson's. And so one of the theories is that embryonic stem cells would be able to cure things like Parkinson's one day. And so he testified, and, it's fairly dramatic testimony when you have somebody that actively has Parkinson's, and they're calling for help from the Congress to, fund this research. It can have a pretty powerful impact. But the story I want to tell, an individual citizen can have a big effect with these hearings. Okay, somebody that has been impacted by a situation. How many of you guys have heard of Megan's Law? You heard of Megan's Law? Well, you probably know it, but may not know it by name. Megan was a young girl that lived in what her parents thought was a safe neighborhood. And unbeknownst to them, a convicted sex offender, child sex offender, moved into their neighborhood. They didn't know it. And Megan became the next victim of this individual. A horrible crime. Megan's mother, after this happened, went to her member of Congress and said, there ought to be a law that people should know where these predators are, where they live, for their own safety and for the safety of their children. She came and testified about what happened to her daughter in front of Congress. And there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Okay? And they passed Megan's Law. And you guys probably know what I'm talking about now, is that convicted sex offenders have to register with the communities they live in. And you can go online. There's an app you can download for your phone and find out where convicted sex offenders live near you. And you will be surprised if you download that app or you can just go on the computer and do it. How many there are in Wichita. One of my best friends used to coach here with me. He's a parole officer. And he dealt with the sex offenders as a parole officer for about 10 years. And He said it was horrible dealing with these people on a daily basis. You can't lock them up and throw away the key. Okay, some of them you can. In fact, Kansas, our former Attorney General, her name was Carla Stovall. She had the honor of arguing in front of the Supreme Court. Kansas passed a law. See, you guys know what recidivism rates are?
Yeah.
Like the likelihood of once you commit a crime, you'll do it again and again. For sex offenders, especially child sex offenders, recidivism rates are extremely high. Okay, it's almost like an addiction. Okay, so here's the thing. Carla Stovall in Kansas passed a law that said if we feel that this person is a threat, even though they've served their time in prison that they were convicted of and they were sentenced to, that we can institutionalize them in a mental hospital for as long as we feel they're a threat. And she won that case in the Supreme Court. See, guys, we have due process. So if you're convicted of a sex crime for 10 years and you serve your time and get out, can they still punish you more? Well, in Kansas, they can put you in a mental hospital. Okay? So this is to protect the people of Kansas, to protect the people of this country from these types of people. So these hearings, I spent a little bit of time on this, but occasionally when you're channel surfing and you stop by C-SPAN and you see a hearing going on, you might stop and see what's going on. Okay? But more likely than not, a lot of these chairs are going to be empty. Staff members can sit in on these and ask questions. When the cameras are all there, usually the staff's not doing it, it's the members of the committee. Okay? All right, so once they have these hearings, they have good testimony on either side. And guys, sometimes this is really political, between Democrats and Republicans. It's just the nature of the factions. So anyhow, once we do the review, okay, so we're on number 4 here. The committee sends bills subcommittee study and public hearings. Just about anyone can present testimony, government officials, industrial experts, and so on, okay? Notice of these hearings, as well as instructions for presenting testimony, is officially published in the Federal Register. So you can go look up these hearings. All right? Then comes markup, okay? If the subcommittee decides to recommend or report the bill, okay, a bill back to the full committee for approval, they must first make changes and amendments to it. This process is called markup. Okay? They may make changes. They don't have to. Okay? So, I want you to think of markup, and this is an important step in the process. Because remember, there's 535 members of Congress. They all can't read and study every piece of legislation. So we leave it to those committees. And so markup and debate in those committees, this is where the real meat and potatoes of the thing happens. Okay? So I want you to think of your English teacher, okay, through the years, or your English teachers through the years. And you turn in a paper, and it comes back, with a bunch of red marks on it. Okay? What did they do to your paper? They marked it up. Okay? They made corrections to it. They made comments to it. This is what they do in subcommittee. Okay? They mark it up. They fix the language. Take things out they don't want. Add things in they want. Okay? And once they do that, the subcommittee votes to report the bill to the full committee. Okay? If they do not have a majority vote in the subcommittee to report it to the full committee, the bill dies. Okay? Now, once we're in full committee, we're on number 6 now. Okay, moving right along. The full committee now reviews the deliberations and recommendations of the subcommittee. The committee may now conduct further review, hold more hearings, or simply vote on it.
She's supposed to be on
I don't know. Is it? Anybody else while we're in intermission?
I was just blowing my nose. They, I don't know.
They're right there. There's Kleenex. What do you need?
I was looking for water. Casey had it.
It's intermission.
Snacks?
Okay. Well, I might as well have a sip myself.
I didn't say that. That was Callie.
Okay.
That wasn't me. That was Callie. Alright, why are you walking over here? Oh, wait, go back.
Smile. You're on candid camera. You guys know that show? No. Candid camera?
Explain it.
It was a famous show back in the 70s. You've seen like these types. Man, I look fat on camera.
Shut up.
Final weigh-in today, by the way. For
Are you winning?
I don't know. We'll find out. I got on the scale this morning. I was kind of pleasantly surprised because my wife bought me one of those triple-decker Taco Bell spicy. You know what I'm talking about? Those wraps.
Like the burrito.
No. It's a big, the big one. Yeah, triple-decker, right? Spicy. Oh my gosh, that was hot. Yeah, so I was eating out about 10:30 last night. Good home beer.
Cold beer. Why don't you just say it out loud? Cold beer. Don't say it under your breath.
Well, you know. Okay. Intermission over. All right, so we are moving to page 76 in my book, at least. Are you on page 76 in your book? All right. If they vote, this is what the committee can do. This is the full committee. They have 4 options. How many options?
4. 8. 9.
Or 2.
Or 10.
If they vote, they can pass it with a positive recommendation. This passage is called reporting the bill to the full body. Pass it with no recommendation. Pass it with an unfavorable recommendation. Doesn't really make sense. That's why it's rare. Or they can kill it. Okay? This is the full committee. So this bill was introduced. It went to subcommittee. They had hearings. They had markup. They sent it to the full committee. The full committee does the same thing over again. And then they decide what they want to do with it. Does it go to the big chambers or not? Okay? Okay, let's say they pass it with a favorable recommendation. Okay? So that takes us to step number 7.
Wait.
Yes?
So if they kill it, the bills.
Bye-bye.
Should they vote to kill it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, they vote, and if it doesn't have a majority, it dies. Okay. All right. Oh, yeah. That's called government. Okay. All right, so publication of committee report. Now, this is very important, okay? The report is important. It will include the purpose of the bill, the impact it will have on existing laws, budgetary considerations, any new taxes or tax increase that will be required by the bill. The report also typically contains transcripts from all the public hearings, as well as opinions of the committee for and against the proposed bill. Key right here. This is what most Congress people base their decisions on, not debate. Okay, because guys, there is going to be a time when we get to the full chamber that they're going to be able to talk about this on the floor. They're going to be able to debate it. Usually, guys, that debate is a bunch of hot air. Because most members of Congress, their staff are going to get this report on this bill. Their staff is going to read it, and the staff is going to talk to the member of Congress and say, look, this is what this bill does. This is how much it costs. This is what effect it will have. Do you want to support this bill or not? You want to read the hearings? You can. Okay? But most members of Congress are going to look at that report from the committee and make their decision based on that. When members get up on the floor and espouse in favor or in opposition to this bill, most members have already made up their mind. It's usually just a bunch of hot air. If that makes sense. Following me? Okay. So, now we're on the floor. This is where it starts to get complicated, guys. Because up to this point, the House and the Senate have acted basically the same. So a bill introduced to the Senate would go through the same process, and the House, the same process. But once we get to the floor, it's totally different. And this is where it gets confusing, okay? So try and stay with me. All right, so let's take each body separately, okay, and talk about floor action number 8, legislative calendar. The bill will now be placed on the legislative calendar in the House or the Senate and scheduled for floor consideration or debate before the full membership. Okay. This is where the power of the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader really take hold. Okay. If they don't like this bill, it's not going to go very far. Okay. So, the House has several legislative calendars and it must be placed on one of those. The Senate, with only 100 and considering fewer bills, has one legislative calendar. The Speaker of the House, and I corrected this in my book. Does yours say House Majority Leader? Does it say Senate? Oh, I fixed it. Okay, good. The Senate Majority Leader decide the order in which the bills will be debated. Okay? If they don't like the bill, they'll put it at a bad time, an inconvenient time, something like that. Okay. So, this is where we start to see some changes. Okay? Well, let's start with the House. Okay? Now, if you look on page 77, of the standing committees in the House, one of them is called the House Rules Committee. Okay? And there are two major issues that we're looking at when we're on the floor. How long are we going to debate this? Now, there's 435 members. I'm sure all of them want to have something to say about every bill, right? So debate could last a while. And then changes. Are we going to allow any changes to the bill once it's on the floor? What are these changes called? Amendments. Good. Amendments. So the House Rules Committee is going to decide these two things for every piece of legislation that enters the House. Okay? Now, so do you think the chairperson of the House Rules Committee has any power? Yeah. Okay? So that's a very important position. Now, let's say, for sake of argument, we are going to... What did I do there? Did I do 2 T's? Yeah, it's bad. Okay. Let's say we're going to debate this for 1 hour. Okay? Now, you don't need to know this for the test. I'm just going to tell you real quick. But generally what they do with these amendments, the House is pretty strict about adding things. Earmarks, pork barrel spending. Have we talked about pork barrel spending? No. This is unnecessary spending. Okay? This is where you have a bill and you add something to it that spends money. Remember we talked about the bridge to nowhere in Alaska? Right, okay. So, yeah, that's an earmark or an amendment. Another name for an amendment is an earmark. Okay? So, the House is pretty strict about it. Okay? You don't, like I said, you don't need it. They use what's called open, closed, and modified as far as amendments are concerned. So open, you can offer amendments on anything on this bill. And it doesn't even have to have anything in relation to do with this piece of legislation. It can be something totally different. Okay? Like Roosevelt's beer and wine with a budget on pensions and, you know, wages. Nothing to do with each other, okay? So that's open. Closed, no amendments. This bill is coming in the way it is, no changes. Like it, vote for it. Don't like it, don't vote for it. Modified, they'll allow some changes to certain parts of the bill, but others no. This part of the bill, we're leaving there, can't change it. This part, open to debate for changes. Make sense? But generally, the thing is, this is usually pretty strict. In the Senate, it's not strict. Okay? So for 1 hour, we're going to debate this on the floor of the House of Representatives. So each party is going to get how long? Yeah. The Republicans are going to get 30 minutes. The Democrats are going to get 30 minutes. Okay? Now, which members of the 435 get to talk? Whoever the Speaker or the Minority Leader wants. They will appoint members that want to speak, and they may give them like 5 minutes each. So you get, you get 5 minutes each. Okay. Now, let's say, are you guys familiar with parliamentary procedure? This is something like when I was growing up, we learned a little bit of. But if you're ever watching Congress or a session of Congress, you'll never hear members talk to each other on the floor. They always talk through the president of the House or the Senate. So like, I'm on the floor, I'm talking, and Jeffrey interrupts me. And he says, Mr. President, will Mr. Ebright yield for a question? Okay, so you go through the speaker so you're not addressing each other. And then I say, yes, I will yield 30 seconds to Jeffrey for a question. And then you're like, hey, Mr. Ebright, I wasn't really sure when you said this, what you meant by that. Could you further explain that point? And I said, and then you would say, Mr. President, I yield back the remainder of my 30 seconds to Mr. Ebright. Okay? And so you can do that. You can offer that time up of your 5 minutes. Okay? When 30 minutes of debate is up, the hour of the debate is up, they move to a vote. Okay? Now, we're not, only in the Senate. Yeah.
Is this like a joint debate, or is this only a debate in the House, and then also they have like a debate?
Totally separate.
Okay.
Okay? So wherever the bill begins, in whichever house the bill begins in, it will be sent to the other bill, to the other chamber, sorry. After it's voted on, if it's passed one house, it'll be sent to the other. Yes?
So for the changes, will they like vote on the changes and then vote to pass the bill, or will they make
Yeah. So they'll vote on any amendments. Good question. So they'll vote on the amendments. The amendment passes. It gets added to the legislation. Okay? And then they vote on it. Now this is where members of Congress get in a lot of, I don't know, not really trouble, but it can affect them because when you get a lot of different pieces in a bill, you may really like the crux of the bill and you think it's important, but there's been amendments added to it that you don't like. But you vote for it anyways because you like the crux of it. But then when you run for re-election, your opponent brings up that amendment that was in that bill that you probably didn't like and you probably wouldn't have voted for, but you did anyways because you wanted to pass this, and it gets used against them. This is why rarely we have members of Congress running for president, because they have these voting records that can be dissected and used against them. Okay? This is why we usually have like governors and vice presidents becoming president. Are you following me on that? Because it gets people in trouble, and the politics just misconstrue, the intent of the vote. For 4 years before he ran for president. He didn't finish his full term before he ran. Now he's in the state legislature in Chicago, or not Springfield, Illinois, for a few years, and was pretty interesting. He voted present a lot instead of voting yes or no while he was in the legislature. You know what that means?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's on the fence. okay, and doesn't want to take a side because he doesn't want to be criticized for it. Okay? Yes? I thought that was a question.
No, I'm just checking.
Because I will take questions if you have one.
Alright, when I get one, I'll ask.
Okay.
So would you rather send the bill to the House or the Senate?
Well, you don't really have a choice if it's spending money, right? So the vast majority of bills start in the House. I don't know if I'd have a preference. Probably the House. I mean, just because of the strict nature of the amendments, I would probably prefer to go there.
I thought you said it was the Senate that debated.
Senate. How about?
Did you say it was the Senate that debated?
No. We're in the House.
Okay, cool. That's fine.
Everything, this is all in the House of Representatives. Okay? Now we're going to talk about the Senate. Okay? So we have a situation where full committee votes it, recommends it to the Senate. Or we can take this bill right here that just passed the House, okay, by a majority vote, and we're going to send it over to the Senate. How about that? All right? How about that? Okay, what are the two major considerations about a piece of legislation on the floor? Amendments and debate, right? Again. And who is going to help determine this? This is where it's different. All 100 have a say. The rules for debate and amendments in the Senate are, there are no rules. There is no rules committee. So if one member is recognized by the chair or the president of the Senate, Jeffrey, I recognize you, the good senator from Kansas, and you stand up and you start talking, they can't shut you down. You can debate as long as you can stand up and as long as you can talk. They can ask. They say, Mr. President, will Jeffrey yield for a question?
Nope.
And Jeffrey can say, no, I will not yield the floor. I respectfully will not yield the
And then
floor.
you talk for like 12 hours and that's what filibuster.
Yeah. Guess what? In the Senate, Jeffrey, while you're doing that long debate, while you're talking, you could just add continual amendments to the bill. Because there's no rule as far as how many amendments are allowed to be added. Okay? So, the rules are, there are no rules. Now, what mostly happens in the Senate is this. Okay, let's agree to debate. Mr. President, I propose that we limit debate on this matter, on this bill, to 1 hour. I ask for a unanimous consent agreement. And then the chair will say, are those in favor of a unanimous consent agreement, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Oh, we got some no's. Let's have a vote. Okay? So, if all 100, okay, this is called a unanimous consent. Did I spell it wrong?
No, sir.
100 senators to 0 agree to limit debate to 1 hour, agree to limit the number of amendments or not allow any amendments, then you have some rules. Okay? Then you have limits. But if one senator or 41 senators, which was the case with Neil Gorsuch's nomination, right, to the Supreme Court, or confirmation, I should say, they had 41 Democrats said no. So, how many votes do you need to stop a filibuster? 60 is the magic number.
Aren't there rules on a filibuster?
Okay. All right. A filibuster is a delaying tactic. There's a piece of legislation on the floor. Let me give you an example. There's a good possibility in the next month we're going to have to raise the debt limit, the national debt, to, I don't know, 21 trillion. This is coming down the pike again. This is happening again. Okay? Now let's say your name is Ted Cruz or Pat Roberts from Kansas or Jerry Moran from Kansas, and you are ticked off about this. You say, you know what we need to do? We just need to cut some spending and not raise the debt limit. Okay? So you take to the floor and you get recognized by the chair. You're a senator. You can stand there and talk and delay a vote, because once you hold the floor, nobody can take it from you. So there's no vote on increasing the debt ceiling until that filibuster ends. Which, for a single individual, the longest individual filibuster was just over 24 hours by Senator Strom Thurmond from South Carolina, who was filibustering the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Strom Thurmond. This is a name that I used to teach a lot in my class because he used to be alive when I was teaching this. But he served into the Senate from South Carolina when he was 100 years old. He died about 7 or 8 years ago. Okay? He died while he was a senator. Okay? Yeah, just over 24 hours for a single individual. Now, let's say the Senate's job is to approve the president's choice for the Supreme Court, right? They have to confirm that's the Senate's job. Okay? Now, if 41 Democrats disagree, they can filibuster. So we're all Democrats in here, okay? So we don't have to do it by ourselves. So I say, all right, I get the floor. I got the floor. Hey guys, I got the floor. All right, we're going to go in shifts. All right, I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes, and then I'm going to yield the floor to you. You talk for 45. You talk for 45. I'm going to go home, take a shower. I'll be back. I'll pick up shift number 10. Okay, you got shift 11. You talk for 45 minutes. And this could go on for years with 41 people. That's a filibuster. Now, when the Democrats say they're going to filibuster Neil Gorsuch's confirmation, the Republicans don't make them do it. It doesn't make sense. Right? So, there is a rule. Did that kind of explain it to you? So the vote can never take place as long as the filibuster's going on. No business gets done. Okay? But the other party doesn't actually make them do it.
Are you allowed to leave all this?
If you're a senator and somebody else is talking, yes. However, if there is if the senator that is filibustering calls for a quorum, what's called a quorum call, you got to have 51 senators there for any business to be conducted. So the sergeant at arms, remember him, can go down the hall to the offices of the senators and drag their butts into the chamber and say, there's a quorum call, you need to come in. Even if it is 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay?
So they can go to your house.
Yes.
Then you come to their house.
But the magic number, people, guys, is 60. Okay, there's a rule in the Senate called a cloture. 60 votes ends a filibuster. That's why the 41 number is so big. If the Democrats only had 40 votes, they couldn't filibuster. Does that make sense? Now, you generally, if somebody wants to filibuster an individual for 10 hours or something like that, generally they won't do a cloture. Don't let that person speak their mind. Make a fool of themselves, if you will. Okay? But if a whole party does it, this is how Obamacare passed, guys. The Democrats had 60 votes. The Democrats had 60 seats in the Senate. The Republicans could not stop it. Okay? And part of my talk tomorrow, as we'll wrap up here in a minute or two, will be, I'm going to take you the process through how Obamacare passed. Because I think it's a very good civics lesson. Okay? So, there we are, the debate. Okay? What do I have on here? Number 9, just talked about the filibuster. The bill gets second reading. They can vote, debate it. They can go to committee as a whole. Less strict rule. That's pretty rare. You don't need to worry about that for the test. Debate for or against the process according to the rules of the House and Senate. The Speaker, and I don't know if I corrected that. What do you have? I'm on 9C1.
Speaker, Senate, President, or...
Okay. That should be Majority Leader, not Senate President pro tempore. In fact, I mean, actually, to be very correct, you could just cross out Senate President pro tempore. Because really the Majority Leader doesn't have the power to set the rules because there are no rules. Every member has a say. Parliamentary procedure that I was just kind of talking about, how we address the chair or the president of the Senate instead of addressing each other. And then the tactic known as the filibuster that will occur in the Senate. Okay? Then we'll talk about voting tomorrow. We'll look at the bill switching. We already did that. And then conference committee is something we've already talked about. And then we'll have presidential action. And then I will talk about how Obamacare passed tomorrow. And then we will be done. We'll have Easter. We'll have Easter Monday, Good Friday, Easter Monday, and then you're off Wednesday? That's Thursday. That's Thursday. Thank you for your attention. I know it was tough.